Course, let me ask you a little bit about what we were just talking about with the market, that maybe this is a reflection that everyone is close to giving up, could be capitulation, could be overdoing it, but they see a recession. This is all about seeing a recession. Do you agree with that?
I do, because I think it's the only thing that Washington knows how to do right now. Keep in mind, inflation is an imbalance between money and goods and services, demand and supply of goods. And there's two ways to bring it down. Either you increase the supply of goods and services or decrease the demand. Washington, especially under Democrat leadership, has not been very good at increasing supply. We're producing less energy, the supply chains are limited, things are happening to restrict supply. Regulation that came off during the previous administration is now back on. So that means the only tool left to get inflation under control is demand destruction, kind of destroy the demand side of the equation, and that is a recession. So why do I think we're going to have one? Because it's all Washington knows how to do right now.
You know, the president said just the other day when the retail sales report came out, it seems like ancient history now, Mick, but that was better than thought. In other words, the rate of increase was a little less than thought. And he said, this is a preview of coming attractions, and quoting here, kind of quoting, I don't have the exact quote here, by the end of next year, we'll be back. Yeah. We'll be through all the rough stuff and on our way. Do you buy that by the end of next year, we're back?
What's the evidence for it? What's the plan for doing that? What's the plan for bringing more goods and services to market? There isn't any. In that same speech, I think he said that his economic plan was working. As best I can tell, his economic plan consists of just spending a lot more money, and that in and of itself is inflationary. So no, I think it's hopeful.
Also saying, no, I hear what you're saying, Mick, but I think what he was also saying is, if you notice, with each and every passing month, the inflation numbers don't get higher. They get a little bit lower from the highs. And that this trend, if you follow that out, I know it's a leap here, but if you follow that out, we'll be back to, even money end of next year. You just don't buy it.
And I guess the reason everybody's so excited about 7% inflation, which is mind-boggling, is just because a couple months ago it was 9%. No, look, I look at the macro issues. What we've got to look at is what was causing inflation in the first place and what of that has changed. We had supply chain difficulties. That's gotten a little better. You've got the war in Ukraine. That hasn't gotten any better. You've got huge government spending. That hasn't gotten any better. And on the demand side, all you've got is increased interest rates, because it's the only thing the Fed knows how to do. So if you look at the reasons that we had inflation in the first place and see what's changed, the only thing that's really changing is the interest rates. So that means that we're going to try and destroy that demand, and that means a recession. Again, I'm trying not to be too negative and too pessimistic. I just understand a little bit how Washington works these days.
All right, let me talk about your old boss, Donald Trump. He is so far the only announced Republican candidate for president in 2024, but he's had a bumpy start. And an NFT card release yesterday has confused a lot of people. Do you think he's botching it?
I certainly think the rollout is not going like he wanted it to. He hasn't done any events. What was the reason he announced when he did? I assume, and it's an educated guess, it was to deter other Republicans from getting in the race and sort of sucking up all the oxygen. That's not happened. The rollout was flat. He's done no campaigns. He's done this crazy NFT thing. I think, if anything, it's just encouraged other Republicans to look at him and say, he's weakened. He's not what he used to be. He's lost that 2016 magic. I'm going to go ahead and take a look at getting in the race. I'm hearing about folks hiring political consultants in my home state of South Carolina, hiring folks in Iowa and New Hampshire. People are getting ready to run against Donald Trump. So if you look at it from the metric of what was his announcement designed to do, it's failed miserably. And it may be that he's lost that magic from 2016. That being said, you and I both know that the cable news is littered with the history of people who have called for Donald Trump's demise too early. He has an amazing ability to come back.
But do you think if it piles up like this, Mick, that he even stays in the race? I mean, he's a proud man. If these numbers still bear themselves out, and you're quite right, numbers often don't do that for very long, that he quits.
Two reasons he would not do this, two reasons he'd pull out. Number one, if he really thought he could lose in a Republican primary. It's easy to say a Democrat, a general election is stolen from you. It's really hard to say that a Republican primary has been stolen from you by say, someone like Ron DeSantis. So if he really thought he was in trouble in a Republican primary, he'd back out on just a question of pride and ego. And the other reason would be his health. He was very aware of his brand and his vivaciousness, his vibrancy. And if he feels like he's lost a step or two, that might encourage him to step back as well, because he doesn't want to be perceived as someone like Tom Brady or Brett Favre, who's perceived as being hanging around too long and should have retired on top. So those are the two reasons. Continue to watch both those things, the polling data that you mentioned and also any news about his health.
Be careful on that, Mick. People have been saying I've been staying around too long, so be very careful about that. But let me ask you this. Do you think he could and would make an independent run?
Yes and no. Why? I mean, the only reason you make an independent run is if you run in a Republican primary and lose. And of course, that's got all sorts of legal difficulties because a lot of states have these sore loser laws. But even if those are right, you can get around those. If you've lost a Republican primary and you're Donald Trump, what do you really think your chances are of winning in a general election? If you can't beat Ron DeSantis and Mike Pompeo, Mike Pence, Nikki Haley, Tim Scott, do you really think you could beat Joe Biden? So I understand that, and there's a certain amount of spite maybe attached to that, and people thinking he might want to sabotage the Republican Party. I don't see that yet. I see him running as a Republican or not running at all. Again, I've been wrong many times so about Donald Trump. I said many people.
Please, please. I beat you on that count, but always good seeing you. If we don't chat again, I hope you have a Merry Christmas, Mick. Very good seeing you.
Merry Christmas, Neil. Thanks.